Greetings! Welcome to the first episode in a series I'm tentatively naming Solo Volo. As the name implies, the challenge today is to defeat Volo, whose battle in Legends Arceus is infamously difficult. Defeat him, that is, with a single Pokemon and using no items. Also, it's Pokemon Red! Today's challenger, somewhat on theme for the channel, is a plain old Porygon, which, if it wasn't obvious, is one of my all-time favourites. This Porygon beat the base game single-handedly in 6 hours and 19 minutes at level 74. I'm probably not going to produce a video for that, but if I do in the future, I'll put a link somewhere. Porygon currently has Tri-Beam, Ice Attack, Thunder Boom, and Spoon Bend. And before doing anything else, I'd like to go and meet the new post-game boss himself to get a feel for how hopelessly difficult this is going to be. For that, we need to make a trip to Pewter City and head into the museum. After paying our children's entry fee of 50 Pokédollars, we can head upstairs, and over here next to the rocket is a suspicious looking individual with an oversized backpack. Hi, you're a new face. Me? Oh, I'm nobody. Nobody important. If you must know, I came from a faraway land. I cannot return. Not ever. Now I spend my days in museums like this to remind me of the old times. Cryptic enough? But enough about me. What's your name, young one? Professor Akiba? Professor Akiba, you say? Professor Akiba? The same name? Is this my fate? To be tormented for my failure for the rest of time? In case it wasn't obvious, the concept is that you just so happen to have the same name as the trainer in Legends Arceus. That makes sense, right? Ha 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 ha! Face me in battle! And if you're wondering who Professor Akiba is, and you aren't sensitive to flashing lights, I recommend finding a way to watch the banned episode of the Pokemon anime Electric Soldier Porygon. First up is the Ghost and Dark type Pokemon Spiritomb, coming with its exact moveset from Legends Arceus. I have in fact added a total of 18 moves to recreate the entire battle as closely as I possibly could. I don't have any super effective moves for Spiritomb, but that's not surprising, considering that was actually the case for all Pokemon prior to the introduction of the Fairy type. And I don't think there's much difference between Ice Beam and Thunderbolt here, but Tri-Attack and Psychic are no good since Spiritomb has immunity. Spiritomb also has nothing particularly good to use on Porygon, although Hypnosis could be a pain. But so far so good, and Porygon manages to clear the first hurdle. Next up is Roserade, who has only 3 attacks, in Spikes, Petal Dance, and Poison Jab, and thankfully it goes for Spikes, which, while annoying for a whole team, isn't much use against a lone Porygon. Psychic is super effective, but only knocks off about half, and Roserade uses Poison Jab, leaving Porygon rather hurt and rather poisoned. But Porygon finishes the job with Ice Beam, which means we get to meet Togekiss. And unlike the sprites you've seen so far, this delightful guy was drawn by the equally delightful Nuuk. But unfortunately, that's as far as Porygon goes in attempt number 1. I'm actually quite impressed it even got that far. So let's have a look at moves, but first, let's have a look at types. Volo's team spans a total of 12 types, so it seems fairly logical that no one type will have a large advantage. But I was curious, so I made type effectivity charts for all of his team, and then took an average. As it turns out, Ice type is his greatest weakness by far, so it's great that we have Ice Beam. But we can do one better with Blizzard. Now, I tend to avoid Blizzard because of its 70% accuracy, except this is Gen 1. And actually, its accuracy is 90%, and its power is a whopping 120, so this should be an excellent move for a large chunk of his team. Returning to the type list, we can see that Porygon's other moves are going to be pretty average, even Psychic. In fact, the only Pokemon he has that's weak to Psychic is Roserade, and that can also be covered with Ice type. Porygon can't actually learn moves of any other types except for these, unless we include Toxic. But this average type chart doesn't tell the full story anyway, so let's look at the Pokemon not covered by Blizzard, one at a time. First up, we have Spiritomb, whose only weakness is Fairy, so we may just have to power through with Blizzard here. Then we have Hisuian Arcanine, or Harcanine, as I've named it in the back end of the game. The only super effective option I could find for this is to mimic its own Rock Slide, but we wouldn't get any more use out of Rock Slide after that, so maybe not. For Lucario, we could copy its Close Combat or use Harkonine's Raging Fury. So with all that in mind, I've got a bit of a plan, and I'm going to swap Ice Beam for Blizzard and feed that free PP ups, and then put Mimic in the place of Thunderbolt. Then we'll speak to Volo again, and the game freezes. Okay, in all the months I spent developing this, I've never had this glitch before. Okay, turns out it wasn't a glitch. Actually, the batteries in my keyboard ran out, so that's a relief. Anyway, battle number 2. Sending out Spiritomb first, the Pokemon in his team with the least weaknesses is an inspired move. And when I say inspired, obviously, I mean it's a direct copy of what Cynthia does. But anyway, it looks like Blizzard is going to have to hit 3 times, which gives Spiritomb far too much time to deal damage, and maybe even use Hypnosis. It is at least quite slow, probably on account of it being attached to a rock. Roserade is up next, and Blizzard would be the best choice, but in an effort to conserve PP, I go for the slightly weaker Psychic attack. Unlike Spiritomb, Roserade is pretty quick, and this time it goes for Petal Dance, the only move it has from Gen 1. The Psychic damage is just under half, and Part 2 of Petal Dance finishes Porygon off. In Battle 3, it goes for Petal Dance again, and I'm using Blizzard this time, but it misses. And when Roserade thrashes about, Porygon just manages to hold on. Blizzard finds its mark and gets a miraculous critical hit, but then Togekiss comes out and uses Extra Sensory, and Porygon is down. In Battle 4, we actually get a one-shot on Togekiss and get to meet Harkonine for the first time. But I'd say this was a bit of a fluke, and of course, Porygon is quickly defeated. So yeah, I was hoping to borrow Togekiss's Moonblast, but as it stands, Porygon just can't take enough hits to make the plan work. So we go through the Elite Four once, twice, and thrice for good measure, bringing Porygon up to level 84. I try Volo again, and in this attempt we get to see just how terrifying Spiritomb can be. Its clever use of Hypnosis seems almost strategic, and whilst Porygon snoozes, it makes use of modern attack after modern attack. Porygon does briefly wake up, and it looks like Blizzard might now be 2 shots instead of 3, but that's if it even gets a chance to attack, and on this occasion, it really doesn't. Now, although I haven't gotten far enough to run out of PP yet, I start to get the impression that 8 shots of Blizzard might not be enough, so I decide to swap out Tri-Attack for Blizzard and keep Ice Beam as backup. Once again, Porygon has a pretty rough time with Spiritomb, but it does win eventually, and as expected, Blizzard is 2 shots to KO. But with its HP this low already, it's not looking good, and Roserade makes use of Poison Jab twice in quick succession, fainting Mr. Polygon again. And while it does just squeeze past Roserade in the next round, clearly this is not working, so it's back to the drawing board. It seems like the problem isn't a lack of attack power, but a lack of defenses, or perhaps I should say, endurance. And looking at the TM list, cheesy strategies involving flash or double team aside, the moves that stand out to me are Rest and Substitute. But if I had to choose one, I'm thinking that recovering HP is the way to go. But to be honest, Rest doesn't seem quite right either. If only it could learn a recovery move that didn't have the setback of falling asleep. And actually, Porygon had chance to learn the move Recover at level 28, but for whatever reason, I didn't go for it. But there's no point dwelling on that now, since there's no way to relearn moves in Gen 1. Except, there is. Pokemon Stadium 2. By using the transfer pack on the Nintendo 64, we can defeat the Johto Gym Leader Castle Elite Four with Porygon and get the chance to relearn Recover. The only trouble is, as you can see, I only have a SNES, so I'm not going to be able to do that. But then I remembered something. This channel is all about exploring the possibilities of ROM hacking, blah blah blah. What's that? Your Pokemon beat Stadium 2 but you didn't get to teach it an old move? That's dreadful! Well, you've come to the right place. So with Recover relearned, there's just one more decision to make. Since the Tri-Attack slot is now taken, I'm only going to be taking one Ice move, and as I want to take down Spiritomb as quickly as possible, I'm thinking Blizzard. Into the battle, and after using Blizzard once, Spiritomb goes for Shadow Ball, which Porygon has immunity to. The second Blizzard connects, and that was basically a perfect Spiritomb battle. Roserade is next, and I go for Psychic to conserve blizzards. Meanwhile, it uses Spikes. Extremely good luck so far. Spikes again, and we finish it off with Psychic. Now it's Togekiss, and I can finally try to mimic its Moonblast, a 95 base power Fairy type move, which I think will come in handy later. Then it's time for Blizzard, but Porygon is outsped, and then it misses, and Togekiss gets in a second Calm Mind, meaning its special stat is now double. And after yet another Calm Mind, Blizzard hits, but the damage is nowhere near good enough. I can't afford to use any more Blizzards here, so I try out Psychic and even Moonblast, but nothing is working. And very soon, Togekiss delivers a finishing blow with Moonblast. Now, despite having said a lot of really nice things about Blizzard earlier, I think I'm done with Blizzard. In a perfect battle where Blizzard hits every time and Togekiss doesn't spam Calm Mind, it might work out, but from here on, I'm gonna stick with Ice Beam. And while Moonblast is nice, I think I'll mimic Calm Mind instead. So, Ice Beam for Spiritomb, and it's frozen. 2 more Ice Beams, and it's done. Roserade outspeeds me again, but Porygon has no trouble dealing with Petal Dance. Now I should probably recover, but I'm gonna mimic Calm Mind first. And I very quickly regret that decision, as Extrasensory has a 10% chance to cause flinching. Right, well that was completely my own fault, but while I was doing that, I just got another idea that I want to try out. Another move that Porygon could have learned but didn't was Agility. This could help in a couple of ways, primarily by allowing Porygon to outspeed Roserade, but also by activating the Badge Boost glitch to boost up all of its other stats a little. So after fibbing to the man again, it's time to try this again, and I have one other trick up my sleeve, which is to use Mimic on Spiritomb and copy its Hypnosis. And after putting Spiritomb to sleep, I can go ahead and use Agility 3 times. And Porygon's badge boosted special is now high enough that Ice Beam is 2 shots to KO. A cautionary Hypnosis on Roserade, but completely unnecessary. So I skip sleep for Togekiss, and it does fall a little short, but Air Slash is fine. For Arcanine, Ice Beam and Psychic both do neutral damage, so it doesn't really matter which I use. And this is going to take a couple more, so let's put it to sleep. Lucario, at last! And thank you to Chibi-Pika for allowing me to use this wonderful sprite. Hypnosis, and this actually resists Ice type, but I seem to have forgotten that. Yeah, Psychic is definitely the way to go. Okay, final Pokemon. And Garchomp has a 4 times weakness to Ice, so this is easy. And just like that, Volo is defeated. Right? Giratina! Giratina, do you hear me? Strike him down! Here we go. Big thank you to utytft for Giratina. Giratina is filled with terrible might. And Mimic and Stat Boosts don't carry over into the Giratina fight. I'll circle back to that point later. And this is not looking good, but I really want to copy its signature move, Shadow Force. Earth Power misses, Porygon vanished, and Giratina destroys me with an Aura Sphere. What was that, you may ask? Well, in Gen 1, moves that always hit, like Swift, actually it's only Swift in Gen 1 usually, hit even when the opponent is using Dig or Fly, or in this case, Shadow Force. I thought it was quite fun to see this weird little interaction between 2 non-Gen 1 moves in the world of Gen 1's quirky mechanics. Anyway, I've got another idea, but first, I'm going to nip through the Elite Four a couple more times. Now, Agility was all well and good, but most of that speed went to waste. It only needed a little speed boost to outspeed Roserade, and the problem with using Agility for the Badge Boost glitch is that it can only be used 3 times. But actually, Porygon learns one other move that fits the bill perfectly. Sharpen is one of Porygon's many signature moves, and provides a boost to its attack stat. And to be clear, boosting its attack stat will do absolutely nothing to improve Psychic or Ice Beam. But unlike Agility, this can be used 6 times. I'm also going to abandon Mimic and go for Recover. This of course means I need to defeat Pokemon Stadium 2 twice. I'm also going to get a couple more PP ups, and I think I may have just built the ultimate Gen 1 Porygon. Right, time to face Volo once more. Since I won't get Hypnosis this time, a lot will depend on how well I can power up with Sharpen. And after 2 boosts, Porygon is put to sleep. But this should be okay as long as it doesn't sleep for too long. Critical hit from Dark Pulse, and this is looking pretty bad. But where there's recover, there's a way. And after a little bit of backwards and forwards, I go for an Ice Beam, and the best thing imaginable happens. That's right, Iced Spiritomb. Delicious. So obviously I'm going to use the last 4 Sharpens, and what? What am I doing? Why? That was not my finest moment, but at least Roserade goes down easily enough. And now Porygon and Togekiss can raise their stats at each other, until Porygon is maxed out. And of course, the important stat is Special, which is now a very respectable 411. But Togekiss has powered up too, and after surviving an Ice Beam, it fires back with a mighty Moonblast critical hit that completely ignores all stat boosts. It's now a scramble to recover, but Togekiss gets yet another critical hit. But all it needs is one more Ice Beam, and Togekiss is down. I take this chance to recover even more, and Arcanine's Rock Slide does very little at all. Psychic is great, and the Fire Rock Doggy is easily dispatched. Lucario next, and I have to stop to check whether I'm meant to use Ice Beam or Psychic. I'm not sure why this confuses me so much. I'd like to say it's because it doesn't really look like a Steel type, but the truth is, I'm really bad at remembering types. Garchomp, and while I know I can beat this in one, I'm using Recover preemptively to have the best chance against Giratina. Although all 4 of its moves do damage, so I won't be able to proceed with full health. Between the last battle I showed and this, I actually lost to Giratina a couple more times, and I should mention that Giratina's so-called Terrible Might equates to a permanent 50% boost to all of its stats. Meanwhile, I lose all of my Badge Boost glitch boosts upon finishing the main battle. Badge Boost glitch boosts? Is there a quicker way to say that? So I start with Sharpen and it goes for a Dragon Claw, which hits very hard. And while I recover, it uses Shadow Force, which is actually great since Porygon is immune to Ghost type moves. This means I basically get a free turn to use Sharpen now. And after maxing out its special stat, we can use a super effective Ice Beam, and there's the freeze. So now would be a good time to use Recover. Or not. Giratina got back up. Gigo Gao Gu! Giratina unleashed its true power. So I'm pretty sure this is wrong, but once again, Porygon's stats are set back to normal. This happens because it's essentially a completely separate wild encounter from the previous one. I need to find out how this works in Legends Arceus, and possibly make a couple of adjustments here. If anybody knows if stat boosts, mimic moves, and indeed substitutes are carried over from the Volo fight into the Giratina fight, and also what is and isn't carried between the 2 phases of Giratina, please do let me know. But anyway, this isn't massively different to the first phase of Giratina, and it occurs to me that actually I probably don't really need to use all 6 Sharpens, and after a couple of Ice Bolts, the job is done. So, Porygon defeats Volo at level 90, after 14 attempts. I have worked tirelessly for centuries, to have the chance to stand before Arceus, to conquer it even. Perhaps my journey will never be over. So there was one other strategy I wanted to try out, and I did give it a go. Basically, when looking at Porygon's Gen 1 move list, I found out that it can actually get Dream Eater via TM in Gen 2, and be sent back to Gen 1. It most likely gains access to Dream Eater in Gen 2 because it can also learn Snore. There wouldn't be much point having Dream Eater on a Gen 1 Porygon when it can't induce sleep. But I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this. If you've seen my Breloom run, you'll already know my feelings on Dream Eater. It's a very, very good move. And while slightly let down by the accuracy of Hypnosis, it does a really good job of beating Volo's main team. Dream Eater is however completely useless for Giratina, since we no longer have Hypnosis. The idea I had was to mimic Shadow Force and use Porygon's other signature move, Conversion, to copy Giratina's types. This makes Shadow Force into a stab move. Of course, the problem is this also leaves Porygon vulnerable to Shadow Force from Giratina. And we end up in a sort of shadow battle, and despite a few attempts, I wasn't able to beat Giratina like this. I really enjoy chatting with you guys down in the comments, and if you'd like to see your favourite Pokemon battle Volo, please do let me know. And if you can think of a better way to fight Volo with a Porygon, I'd love to hear about that too. And as always, I'd like to wish you a wonderful day, and I look forward to welcoming you back to another video soon. For now, bye!